Good evening, my name is Tamanai Kessa Dempsey, and this is my Sprint 1 review. My primary goal for this sprint was to create the vertical slice level design. Our epic here is to create the vertical slice, and in it we have the level breakdown, the flowchart, and then exactly what each of these spaces will contain. I did not log time specifically on the epic, but time was logged on the subtasks and the task below. Below this, we have the IPM chart that determines where things are implemented. First things are the tutorials. The tutorials for section 1 includes your basic movements. It also includes how to use your book, how to open your menu. Space is to jump, holding shift is to skip and move faster. Implementing all of these tutorials into section 1 of the map took me about an hour, which was 15 minutes over my original estimate. You can see more of these tutorials here as you continue. They tell you how to interact with your world, and they also tell you exactly what it is you're grabbing, how it's used, and where you can find it. There is quite a few tutorials in this first section, and then they are more dispersed as you move on throughout the levels. The first thing I did was add the bubble diagram, and while I can't show you this at the moment because it does get removed, I essentially took that original bubble diagram from the epic and I dropped it into the level on a plane and I built on top of it like a used map. This took only about 15 minutes to get it implemented, and so that's what I've tracked. Currently, this is Section 1, Zone 1, which is the main area of the house. The player begins in the main living space, learning basic movement and interaction mechanics. This build potion must be cleaned up, teaching object interaction. Movement, walking, strafing, looking around, and collecting objects, menu navigation, collectibles, feather oil, obstacles, none, and guiding is breadcrumbs. This took 4 hours to set up, only because it did take a long time to get everything dispersed properly. The room was big enough without causing clipping. We used lights and colors and framing in order to guide the player of where it is they should look. However, inside of the house, we did encourage a little bit more exploration, and we wanted the players to look around some more. So there are details around the house that does encourage that. Section 1, Zone 2. This is the Little Alchemist's bedroom, a cozy bedroom that encourages early exploration and introduces the player's alchemy book and compass. We did end up moving the compass into the dining room, but both of these things are still implemented inside of the house. Mechanics introduced is exploration and interaction with the book. Collectibles, 1 flower, obstacles, none, and guiding breadcrumbs. This one took an hour and a half to set up. Oh. So here is the flower that it says it can collect. However, you can't see that it's in your inventory until you pick up this book. When you pick up the book, it does tell you what the book does. This is your collected knowledge of recipes, crafting, spells, tools, and you press tab to open it. We also put tab down at the bottom in case players forget. So this will tell us exactly what it is you have, and then you can craft in here. You have recipes, tools and what they do, and your spells. Section 1, Zone 3 is Cyrus's bedroom. Cyrus is the father of the little alchemist. Another room to explore with a hidden collectible, mechanics practice, exploration, collectibles, brownie potion, obstacles none, guiding none. Again, guiding we didn't really do for this one because we wanted you to go explore. Exploration is one of the pillars for the game. That is another tutorial. And then in here, we have the brownie potion, which will make you shrink. It also tells you on that tutorial of movement that you can change perspectives to first person. So this just says you've spilled the father's prized potion. You must obtain the ingredients he used and craft a legendary potion before he returns home, or you'll be in big trouble. Interact with E to clean up the mess. And so that gives you the setting, the goal for the game. And then here is the compass that originally was in the little alchemist's bedroom. Found the compass. This compass points you to the nearest reagent, tool, or potion, so anything collectible. Section 1, Zone 4 is the front door and garden entry. Openings in the environment guide the player to the front door leading to a garden filled with reagents. Mechanics introduced, collecting reagents, crafting introduction, collectibles, flour and stone, no obstacles yet, and guiding is openings attract. This one took roughly an hour and a half to do, just so that we made sure the pacing was correct and everything could move properly. If you try to leave throughout the house, it does warn you that you'll need your alchemist tome and your raging compass. This goes back to guiding the players with more of what their goals should be and that they don't move on without collecting their necessary equipment. A key must be collected to open the door, and you get more movement information once you're outside. So, holding shift allows you to skip, spacebar is to jump, and then 1, 2, 3 is your tool hotbar. So it's 1, 2, 3. The garden is over here. Anything purple are collectible reagents. It is E to collect, and the closest one will light up. And your compass will turn when you get close to other collectibles, if you look at the bottom right. So here, get more information. So far, we've got a brownie potion, a topsy-turvy potion, 2 flower extracts, 5 flowers, and 2 stones. It might be hard to see on the screen recording, but there are numbers and their title. One of the bugs we currently have is that when it pulls from the class defaults, the text does go off of screen, but we're working on remedying that. So in order to craft, you click and it puts it into your crafting pyramid, and then clicking again will retrieve your item. If you use your recipes here, something like a glow bug will require mushroom paste and flower extract, topsy-turvy is mushroom paste and stone dust, and brownie potion is flower extract and leaf dust. So there is nothing we can currently craft. To encourage exploration, we also have different areas like this storage shed, and again, you can switch perspectives in order to see better. Section 1, Zone 5, Alchemy Area. A workstation featuring an alchemy table with the collectible potions and hints about future crafting opportunities. Collecting and crafting preparation. Flower extract, topsy-turvy potion, Key to gate in Zone 9. No obstacles yet, and the guiding is framing. This took another hour and a half because we wanted to, again, make sure that the pacing was correct, and we had a hard time getting the key to not automatically open the door. So we've already collected the Topsy-Turvy Potion and the Flower Extract, and these are here to show the player what they can create later, even though they can't make these quite yet. So once they collect the key, then you are able to open the gate. Section 1, Zone 6 is the storage room. A small storage space filled with tools, books, and supplies. Mechanics practiced is exploration. Collectibles is leaf dust. No obstacles, and your guiding is framing. Guiding framing just means that we are using the shapes that we have in order to draw your intention towards that. So you can go in here and collect your leaf dust, and then you have that, and that is another thing you can use for more recipes. So this one can be used for the brownie potion. But we do need 4, and we only have 1 at the moment. Section 1, Zone 7. Path into the forest. Dirt path introduces vertical movement mechanics and natural obstacles. Skipping and jumping is your mechanics introduced. Collectibles is vines and leaves. Obstacles, fallen rocks requiring jumps. And guiding is breadcrumbs and leading lines. So we are using these little blue glowing stones as our breadcrumbs. We're using leading lines with the cobblestone path that might end up being a dirt path once we start getting assets into the level, but it won't be decided until then. You found a tool. Mundane objects like vines, bark, and dandelion seeds can be turned into useful tools like ropes, bridges, and gliders. Check your tome to see what spell symbols are. So these can be used in different places throughout the level. And for example, if you go over here, it tells you that the stone is too high. Try to make a tool to help. Check your tome for clues. Opening the tome, you can look at the tools and see which ones you should use, and it will tell you that vines enable climbing to reach high-up reagents. So, because it's in slot 1, I'm going to use the first hotbar. You're going to cast your spell, and then once you cast your spell, you'll climb up to the top. E is to collect as it lights up the closest reagent, and blue is tools. The next one we've collected is bark. Section 1, Zone 8, climbing ledge. A rock ledge requiring players to craft rope from vines before they can climb up. Mechanics introduced. Tool usage, spellcasting basics. Collectibles, mushrooms and bark. Obstacles, climbing ledge requiring rope. Guiding is framing. So, as said before, the guiding with framing is just how we're positioning things. We've already collected those mushrooms, and now we have the rocks that were already mentioned in this as our hurdle and introduction into jumping. Arcane door. This door has an arcane lock. To progress, you'll need to locate its spell and cast it correctly. So, here is the arcane door. It's E to interact, but we don't know the spell quite yet. So, you have to draw the correct spell in order to clear it, and we don't have that information at the moment. Section 1, Zone 9. Small clearing with a locked gate. A gate area requiring access from another side. Mechanics practice is exploration. Collectibles, stone crystal. Obstacles, locked gate. And guiding is framing and breadcrumbs. I will say there's a note down here, though, that I decided to not do breadcrumbs because I did not want to confuse the player about what the main path was. This one took an hour and a half as we worked on properly blocking off the area without making it look like the player is walled in. So moving over here, the player can explore and can create those listed collectibles, as in the stone that we had just picked up. There is a door here, but if you interact with it, it will tell you on a print string that the player has to be in front of the door, and we are not. However, exploring this area, you will find the spell symbol for the door that we are currently trying to get through. Skipping makes you go faster, as indicated by the tutorial once you are leaving the house. And keep your eye out for tools so you don't miss any. Again, jumping over rocks, E to interact, and then you draw your spell symbol. Once you close this, the door is open. The red lock turns green and moves to the ground, and then you are in the next area. Section 2, Zone 10. So that gate officially marks this section. Mushroom clearing, a vibrant clearing with different types of mushrooms. Mechanics practiced, skipping for faster movement. Climbing, collectibles are mushrooms, obstacles, climbing required for certain mushrooms, and guiding is leading lines and breadcrumbs. This one took an hour and a half. Most of these, actually, I apologize, this one took 2 hours. I tried to budget myself on an hour and a half because honestly I could spend hours doing level design, but that wasn't our primary goal with this, so. This is also the character's first introduction into possible hazards. Now, it does state that we are practicing the skipping mechanic. This is because we have left open this longer path here, and a lot of people are going to want to skip through it, make it faster. However, this first zone in section 2 is this mushroom clearing. And if we go over here, we'll find another climbing rock, interacting with our hotbar. We can cast the vine spell, and then we have climbed. There are more reagents up here to collect. And that is where we got our mushrooms, our climbing, and then the breadcrumbs remain to be those glowing blue stones. Section 2, Zone 11, is a thorny bush clearing, a dangerous area where reagents are hidden among thorny bushes. Mechanics practiced, careful movement, jumping over hazards. Collectibles, bark. Obstacles, touching thorns resets the level. Guiding, none. Again, with this guiding, we didn't want players to feel like they were being railroaded one direction or another. At the bottom of this clearing, there is 2 paths that players may take, and this one is not necessarily a requirement. This one took another hour and a half to set up, but again, that is a budget time for myself. Collecting the bark, and I won't be doing it for this particular introduction, but running into those thorns will reset us back at the house. Section 2, Zone 11. Description, fallen rocks with a small hole. A series of fallen rocks blocks a passage. We are not quite there yet, so we're actually going to go on to Zone 13. River crossing. A river cuts through the level. Players must find bark and use spellcasting to create a bridge. Mechanics practiced, spellcasting. Collectibles, stone crystal. Obstacles, falling into the river resets the level. Guiding is leading lines. And it did take another hour and a half, but I logged 2 hours on this as we were having some issues with the kill volume in the river. So, the river is pretty basic. It is just a blue mesh with no collision, and under that there is a kill volume. There are plenty of things here to collect if the player chooses to wander, and this does lead back into one of our pillars being exploration. We want to reward that with our players. So you can find mushrooms here and stones, as long as you don't touch the thorns. This space on the other side of the river is just meant to look more open world. It is not accessible. And if the players continue this way, they find more breadcrumbs that lead them back towards the second path and more collectibles. You can't cross here, it is too far. Trying to jump across will land you in the water. Try finding some other way. So jumping across will land you in the water and then you'll need to restart the level. What you can do though is use your bark that you've collected. So if you don't remember how to use those, you can go down to spells and they will be listed here. Now we kept these simple for the tutorial and the testing sake. Bark is the middle column. And upon closing this, you can clear and cast your spell there. And then you get a bridge. Now, while we haven't seen a second locked door, we do have another key here, so it would be important to keep an eye on those. More breadcrumbs, more leading lines, and we also have been using these lantern posts as breadcrumbs as well. And this is actually where we would reach Zone 12. Series of fallen rocks blocking a passage with a small hole only accessible if the player shrinks. Mechanics practiced, crafting the brownie potion. No collectibles, must craft and use the brownie potion to proceed. And the guiding is framing. So, we do have leading lines over here, but specifically in this spot we have our framing, this archway. It does allow you to go in some, but if you try to progress, it will tell you that you are too big. Rocks have fallen and blocked the path. You'll need to make yourself smaller to continue. We also put a breadcrumb here to encourage the players that that is in fact the direction they are supposed to go. Now we need a brownie potion, and we already have one, but we're also going to see if we can make one. So for this, we need 1 flower extract and 4 leaf dust. That would be flour, mixed flower extract, and we do not have enough leaf dust. So we are going to use our brownie potion. It'll give you the option to use or craft with your potions, and we're going to use it. That is a second bug that we are having with our brownie potion, is that occasionally it will have a collision error. Section 2, Zone 13 is the river crossing. Section 2, Zone 14. This one is a hidden, abandoned clubhouse with remnants of a child's alchemy experiments. Mechanics practice is collecting ingredients, collectibles topsy-turvy potion, stones, and vine. No obstacles, and we're using framing for guiding. This one also was budgeted for 1.5 hours. And again, there are 2 paths here, and the framing is a mix between this high landscape on the side and another breadcrumb pole over here, and some children's belongings, including one of the topsy-turvy potions, which we now have 2 of. Section 2, Zone 15. The remains of a lost structure with scattered stone pillars and an alchemy table. Mechanics practice is advanced exploration. Collectibles, stone crystals, leaves, and feather oil. No obstacles, and the guiding is leading lines. This one took 1.5 hours as well. I likely would have spent more time on this area, but again, we wanted to disperse our time throughout the level pretty evenly, so. And then once you collect your feather oil and your stones, you can again check your recipes and see what exactly you can make from those. Section 2, Zone 16. A clearing leads to the final area, with the last major obstacle a spell-locked gate. Mechanics practice, tool collection, and spell casting. Collectibles, dandelion seed, obstacles, spell casting required to open the gate, and guiding is color. This one took only an hour, so it actually took less time than expected. And if we continue over here, we'll find our first dandelion seed, and our book will tell us that the dandelion seed allows us brief gliding over short distances to avoid obstacles like prickly plants. So it'll allow your character to glide. E to interact on the door. Make sure you clear any spells you have on there. And then cast the spell for the door. Each door has its own spell. Over here, you're going to be using your vine. So that's 1 on the bar, and then the vine is that first column. Interesting. Oh, there was a delay. Section 3, Zone 17. So again, that gate marks the difference between Section 2 and Section 3. And here we have a forested area leading to the cave entrance with useful tools and reagents. Mechanics practice is your climbing, collectibles, flowers, and leaves. Obstacles, climbing ledge required to reach the entrance. And guiding is breadcrumbs. This one took 1 hour, so again, under budget. And we can go around and collect our flowers and leaves. We already did the climbing, and then the path leads down. There is more things over here. Again, as we encourage exploration, we have a dandelion seed. We have some more reagents. And we are just going to collect everything we see. And we have a spell. Now this spell is the most difficult one as it is the last door. And more breadcrumbs lead you in. Section 3, Zone 18, Description, the remnants of an alchemy station with old potions and ingredients. Crafting, players must decide which ingredients they need. Collectibles, topsy-turvy potion and flower extract. No obstacles, and you're guiding breadcrumbs. This one took 1 hour. Again, less time than expected. I didn't end up filling this place with a lot of clutter, but I will say that it was fun to try and piece these rocks together. It would be helpful in here if you were to use the glow bug potion. That would allow you to see better. You'll also find crops over here where mushrooms were grown, and this area was used for creating more reagents. So over here, you can create a bridge if you would like, but because we have a glider, we're actually going to use that instead. So there are different ways to do different tasks in this game, and it again allows players more affordance. Section 3, Zone 19 is the librarian's storage room, a dusty-filled room with old alchemy books and supplies, mechanics practices exploration. You can find mushroom paste and flower extract, no obstacles, and the guiding is framing. That one took only 45 minutes to create, and that is the library that we had just walked through. Zone 20 is the reagent garden that I showed you with the mushrooms. Too dark to see without the glow bug potion, breadcrumbs, and leading lines. That one took only 10 minutes to create. I'm not sure how long I had expected it to take, but again, all of these were budgeted out for an hour and a half. Section 3, Zone 21 is the exit door. The final locked door leading back to the Bubble 9 in Zone 1. Mechanics mastered, spellcasting to unlock the exit, collectibles none, spellcasting required to open the door, guiding is lighting, and openings attract with the exit of the cave. This one took 30 minutes to create. The biggest issue I had was actually lining up the bridge. So, other than creating the actual level, that is all of my Jira tasks. I did cover the IPM chart and the tutorials, which I had as separate tasks in Jira. I had 42 in total, and thank you all for watching.
Hello, my name is Maurice Pollock, and today I will be discussing the game balancing data from Little Art on this. So let's get into it. So the first task is, as a game balancer, I want to analyze data from how long it takes for the player to complete a level. This took 3 days and 3 hours and 3 minutes, a little over than what was intended to be, but let's get into it. Does the player beat a level 3 minutes or less, or does the player take longer to beat a level? So from my data, I ended up estimating that it was 6 minutes from the first play test that the player ended up accomplishing. As they accomplished, they this was due to one bug of the door level that causes the spell or the pop-up prompt for the door to not actually open up. Tools collected after they finished up after after the results. Tools that were collected was only 4, and 26 remnants was actually collected. Mushroom, flower, stone were all collected. Stone was the biggest portion of everything that ended up making it to the point where it was like the highest. So adding overall, it came up to 26. 26 in terms of total remnants that was collected. How many times did the player craft different potions within levels? It took 4 hours and 6 minutes. How many of each type of potion was crafted within levels? Does the player craft any of the 3 potions, Glowbug, Brewing, or Tipsy Turvy? So from my chart is that the player only crafted one Glowbug potion during the first playtest, and this was due to them having the resources that they needed for mushroom paste and 4 extract flowers that they ended up accomplishing after during crafting. Tipsy Turvy and Bruin were 2 potions that were not crafted. They was part of the starting game as the player collected them during level 1 part of the level. As player proceeded, player ends up getting 1 death during their time of when they stepped on a deadly hazard thorn bush, and it causes the player to actually reattempt the level to get everything else. In overallness, for everything, for all the data that I have collected, 76 items in total were collected, including the bark, the vine, including the bark and the vine. So, next one. The next zero task, how many attempts it took for the player to complete the level. Wait. Determine how it attempts to look at the player to beat the level and how many players died within a specific level. Did the player die while exploring the level? During the first playtest, player ended up dying in the first part, which caused them to actually do 1 retake of the overall level. They have to start all over again to cause them to have that 1 attempt. Second, what items were used the most from other items? What potions that was used by the player the most than other potions and tools that were used the most? So from the data I have collected, the tools that were used the most, were the vines. The vines were used the most compared to the dandelion. The dandelion wasn't used at all because the player proceeded to not find any. So the vines ended up coming in as the most used in terms of getting up to high ledges to collect different regnets. which caused the estimate, causing player to have no dandelions to be picked up for in terms of data. All the data is that I plan to use this data to determine like when the player finds dandelion seeds, they will be able to use them in depending on how the balancing of the game should be for different obstacles and other things that would be useful for the dandelion for the player to keep track of. But next, next steps. Does the player have enough items in inventory to craft? Determine if the player has enough items in inventory for crafting different types of potions. Criteria. Does the player have enough flower extract to craft? Does the player have the required amount of mushroom paste? Does the player have enough regnant left over to craft another potion? This took 4 hours and 56 minutes. So, from my data that I ended up finding, this is also in the second playtest. During the second playtest, this caused the player to find 9 mushrooms, which gives them an estimate of allowing them to craft 2 glow bug potions and another brewing potion alongside topsy turvy potion, including the 2 additional ones that already been found. But they did manage to craft 1 topsy turvy and 1 brewing potion the glow alongside the glow bug potion with the amount of items that they have already in their inventory. This gives the player a total amount of redness collected is 32, and ingredients that was crafted during this was 30 30 30 crafting 30 ingredients collected during during the second playtest. Does the player have enough flower extract? Player ended up having 6 flowers that caused them to be able to craft additional potions for Glowbug potion and Topsy Turvy alongside with Browning. So, the data overall it got the player in terms of all items that were collected and crafted, that gives up 137 items pretty much were collected. This data shows that some items weren't being used properly, like the dandelion seed and the feather to create the feather oil. But feather oil has been collected throughout the level. To give a better understanding for the player to be able to use these items to actually craft other items that is not within the game. Not within the game. I would be using this data to try to balance out what items that players can use to craft stuff, like the feather oil. Due to there's being no feathers, this allowed the player to not craft feather oil to be able to craft other potions. As bugs and stuff came in, the bugs end up eliminating certain aspects of core gameplay data from players for players due to the issues. This causes some data features to actually not be complete accurate, but as time goes on and as those bugs got fixed, it causes a much higher accurate depending on how how the items were collected and crafted. Introduction. Introduction took 3 hours and 20 minutes long. Did the player complete the introduction? Hold on. Well, the actual original name for this Jira task were actually did the player interact? Oh, never mind. The practice is, does the player interact with the items? Okay. Okay. I hope. I think that's pretty much. Wait. Did the player use the ability mechanics criteria? Did the player use crafting book when picking up picking up Regnus during gameplay? Does the player die during gameplay? Did the player use tools to craft or get around during the level? Player did use from my data in the second playtest. Player in the third playtest, player did used uh, player did use vines to be able to get up to high areas while finding them. That also goes along with the bark. The bark was also used to create a bridge for the player to get across to certain areas. So, does player die during gameplay? This goes back to the first that player ends up gaining one death, depending on the gains on one death when exploring, stepping on thorn flesh. That eliminates the player. That causes the player to have to restart all over again, and have one level attempt to retake. This is it for this is my final part for as game balancer. I want to for being a game balancer for little Artemis. I hope this little small information is not too complicated, but it's something. So I hope you guys enjoy next time. Hello, my name is Maurice Pollock, and today I will be discussing the game balancing data from Little Artemis. So let's get into it. So the first task is, as a game balancer, I want to analyze data from how long it takes for the player to complete a level. This took 3 days and 3 hours and 3 minutes, a little over than what was intended to be, but let's get into it. Does the player beat a level 3 minutes or less, or does the player take longer to beat a level? So from my data, I ended up estimating that it was 6 minutes from the first play test that the player ended up accomplishing. As they accomplished, they this was due to one bug of the door level that causes the spell or the pop up prompt for the door to not actually open up. Tools collected after they finished up after the results tools that were collected was only 4, and 26 regnants was actually collected. Mushroom, flower, stone were all collected. Stone was the biggest portion of everything that ended up making it to the point where it was like the highest. So adding overall, it came up to 26. 26 in terms of total regnants that was collected. How many times did the player craft different potions within levels? It took 4 hours and 6 minutes. How many of each type of potion was crafted within levels? Does the player craft any of the 3 potions, Glowbug, Brewing, or Tipsy Turvy? So from my chart is that the player only crafted one Glowbug potion during the first playtest, and this was due to them having the resources that they needed for mushroom paste and 4 extract flowers that they ended up accomplishing after during crafting. Tipsy Turvy and Bruin were 2 potions that were not crafted. They were part of the starting game as the player collected them during level 1 part of the level. As the player proceeded, player ends up getting 1 death during their time of when they stepped on a deadly hazard thorn bush, and it causes the player to actually reattempt the level to get everything else. In overallness, for everything, for all the data that I have collected, 76 items in total were collected, including the bark, the vine, including the bark and the vine. So, next one. The next Jira task, how many attempts it took for the player to complete the level. Wait. Determine how it attempts to look at the player to beat the level and how many players died within a specific level. Did the player die while exploring the level? During the first playtest, player ended up dying in the first part, which caused them to actually do 1 retake of the overall level. They have to start all over again to cause them to have that 1 attempt. Second, what items were used the most from other items? What potions that was used by the player the most than other potions and tools that were used the most? So from the data I have collected, the tools that were used the most were the vines. The vines were used the most compared to the dandelion. The dandelion wasn't used at all because the player proceeded to not find any. So the vines ended up coming in as the most used in terms of getting up to high ledges to collect different regnants, which causing player to have no dandelions to be picked up for in terms of data. All the data is that I plan to use this data to determine like when the player finds dandelion seeds, they will be able to use them in depending on how the balancing of the game should be for different obstacles and other things that would be useful for the dandelion for the player to keep track of. But next, next stats. Does the player have enough items in inventory to craft? Determine if the player has enough items in inventory for crafting different types of potions. Criteria. Does the player have enough flower extract to craft? Does the player have the required amount of mushroom paste? Does the player have enough remnant left over to craft another potion? This took 4 hours and 56 minutes. So, from my data that I ended up finding, this is also in the second playtest. During the second playtest, this caused the player to find 9 mushrooms, which gives them an estimate of allowing them to craft 2 glow bug potions and another brewing potion alongside topsy turvy potion, including the 2 additional ones that already been found. But they did manage to craft 1 topsy turvy and 1 brewing potion the glow alongside the glow bug potion with the amount of items that they have already in their inventory. This gives the player a total amount of redness collected is 32, and ingredients that was crafted during this also was 30 30 30 crafting 30 ingredients collected during during the second playtest. Does the player have enough flower extract? Player ended up having 6 flowers that caused them to be able to craft additional potions for glowbug potion and topsy turvy alongside with browning. So, the data overall spun it overall it got the player in terms of all items that were collected and crafted, that gives up 137 items pretty much were collected. This data shows that some items weren't being used properly, like the dandelion seed and the feather to create the feather oil. But feather oil has been collected throughout the level. To give a better understanding for the player to be able to use these items to actually craft other items that is not within the game. Uh, Not within the game. I would be using this data to try to balance out what items that players can use to craft stuff, like the feather oil. Due to there's being no feathers, this allowed the player to not craft feather oil to be able to craft other potions. As bugs and stuff came in, the bugs end up eliminating certain aspects of poor gameplay data from players for players due to the issues. This causes some data features to actually not be complete accurate, but as time goes on and as those bugs got fixed, it causes a much higher accurate depending on how how the items were collected and crafted. Introduction. Introduction took 3 hours and 20 minutes long. Did the player complete the introduction? Hold on. Well, the actual original name for this Jira task were actually did the player interact? Oh, never mind. The practice is, does the player interact with the items? Okay. Okay. I hope. I think that's pretty much. Wait. Did the player use the ability mechanics criteria? Did the player use crafting book when picking up picking up Regnus during gameplay? Does the player die during gameplay? Did the player use tools to craft or get around during the level? Player did use from my data. In the second playtest, player in the third playtest, player did used uh, player did use vines to be able to get up to high areas while finding them. That also goes along with the bark. The bark was also used to create a bridge for the player to get across to certain areas. So, does player die during gameplay? This goes back to the first that player ends up gaining one death, depending on the gains on one death when exploring, stepping on a thorn flesh that eliminates the player, that causes the player to have to restart all over again, and have one level attempt to retake. This is it for this is my final part for as game balancer. I want to for being a game balancer for Little Artemis. I hope this little small information is not too complicated, but it's something. So hope you guys enjoy next time.
Hello, my name is Shane Van Dusseldorp, and this is the breakdown of all of the work I've done throughout this first sprint. Right, let's go ahead and take a look at our very first Jira thing here. So we have our change text tools. Our summary is the imagined as tag needs to be changed to fit with the updated mechanics of the game. The expected result is for the tools page to not say imagined as. Our actual result at the time was the tools page says imagined as. Steps to replicate. Number 1, open the crafting menu. Number 2, open tools subpage. Number 3, you make a note that the page says imagined as. The severity for this is moderate, and I spent 30 minutes on this one. Let's go ahead and start the game here so we can go ahead and show that change. All right. So within the tools, it no longer says imagined as. For our next one, I have incorrect recipe. For the summary, the topsy-turvy potion recipe needs to be changed from stone crystal to stone dust. The expected result is that the recipe is listed as requiring stone dust. Our current, at the time, actual result was that the recipe is listed as requiring stone crystal. Steps to replicate. Number 1, open crafting menu. Number 2, open recipe subpage. And number 3, note that the page says stone crystal. Severity for this is moderate. I spent about 2 hours working on getting both the recipe and the UI fixed. Go ahead and show that here. Oh, it's the wrong one. Go ahead and redo this here. So, for our recipes, topsy-turvy is now listed as using 3 stone dust rather than crystal. For our third one here, we have cursor not centered on nib. The summary is that the real cursor location is somewhere in the middle of the custom cursor. Our expected result is that the real cursor location is at the tip of the quill, or the nib. Our actual result is that the cursor location was somewhere within the middle of the quill. Steps to replicate, open menu, move cursor, note the buttons react before and after the nib reaches them, and then note that the cursor real location is somewhere in the middle of the cursor. I spent about 4 hours on this, and then I had an issue with the time logging, so it says I took a lot more. And we'll go ahead and show that here. So the nib is now what activates our buttons and other features such as our spells. And our next one is our cursor or quill disappearing. For the summary, our packaged builds did not have access to the custom cursor. Our expected result that our package builds would have access to the custom cursor, and our actual result was that it did not have access to the custom cursor. For our steps to replicate, we would launch a package build, and then note that the cursor is not the custom one set for the project. I spent about 2.5 hours working on this, and as we can see within our package build, we have access to our cursor. For our next one, we have tools and recipes buttons take multiple button presses. For our summary, the buttons for the tools and recipes often take several presses to work properly. Our expected result is that buttons click on the first press. Our actual result at the time was that these buttons can take multiple presses before they function properly. For steps to replicate, we had open crafting menu, attempt to open tools or recipe menus, and then note that buttons may not function properly at the first try. I spent 4 hours working on this particular task. And as we can see here, these work on the first try. our next one, we have reagents can be used to create ingredients indefinitely. For our summary, once obtaining a reagent, the player can use them to create ingredients indefinitely. Our expected result is that reagents make a set amount of ingredients and absolutely no more. Our actual result at the time was that players can craft ingredients indefinitely after obtaining a single reagent. For our steps to replicate, first we would have to obtain a reagent, second, craft an ingredient, and third, note that you can continue to craft ingredients. In here, we've already picked up this flour, which is one of our reagents. We can go ahead and put that into here, and now see that our reagent is gone. We can no longer craft infinite amount. And for this task, I spent 4 hours. For our next one, I had items are deleted when clicking on other items within the crafting pyramid. For our summary, items placed within the crafting pyramid are deleted if another item is selected. Our expected result, that unused materials must be returned to the player's inventory if another item is placed. For our actual result, at the time, when items are placed within the crafting pyramid while there are already items within, the items previously within the pyramid are deleted. For steps to replicate, we equip ingredients to the crafting pyramid. Secondly, we equip a different item to the crafting pyramid. And third, we note that items previously placed within the pyramid are deleted permanently. The severity of this is critical, and I spent 4 hours on this task. Go ahead and grab our key here. And let's go pick up some more items. And then here we can put flour and stone. And it didn't delete any of the items. And everything stays as it should. For our next one, we had difficulty with interaction. For the summary, interaction does not work always on the first try. For our expected result, if you are looking at an object, to be able to pick it up on the first try without issues. Our actual result was that at times picking up objects can be quite cumbersome, and some objects require several tries to pick up properly. For our steps to replicate, first we would have to open a level, and then walk to a collectible, and then attempt to interact. After that, we would note that interaction does not work. It does not always work, sorry. For our severity, this was critical, and I spent 4 hours on this task. Go ahead and walk over to this one here, and note that we can pick it up on the first try. For next one, we had a physics issue with picking up objects. For our summary, we had, when attempting to pick up objects, they can get launched a far distance. Our expected result is that the object stays in place when the player approaches it. The actual result at the time was that when player approaches the collectible, they can send the object flying when their collision volumes touch. For our steps to replicate, first we'll open the level, and then walk to the collectible, and then the item will become a fast-moving projectile getting launched across the map. The severity of this was high, and I spent 4 hours on this particular task. Go ahead and let's see. Another item here. And we can know when we walk into it, we will not move it. For our next one, on our summary, on begin play, leaves will fall through the landscape instead of sitting on the ground. Our expected result was that as the level begins and collectibles are created, their gravity should take effect and land the object dynamically on the ground. Our actual result was that leaves fell through the level terrain in several places on begin play. For our steps to replicate, this is outdated because at the time we had a different level, but we just load a level and then note that there is a leaf somewhere and note that it falls through. The severity was high, and because leaves are a core reagent, if they continue to fall through the map, players will not be able to collect them to craft the necessary ingredients and potions. This can cause them to be unable to progress in some areas. I spent 2 hours on this task, and let's see here. And we will have to progress a little bit further before we get the chance to encounter a feather. Um, well, it seems that one may not have been fixed. Apologies. All right, and then for our last one here, we have for the summary, the spell screen at the end level end door does not allow the player to cast a spell after interacting with any items. Our expected result is that we start the level, pick up an item, and traverse to the level end door. Oh my goodness, that was changed up. Sorry. The expected result was that the level end door would work properly. Our steps to replicate was that we would start the level, pick up an item, and then travel to the level end door and note that it did not work. For our actual result, we noticed that after interacting with any items within the level, the player will no longer be able to use the spell screen at the level end door. The severity for this is critical, and I logged 4 hours on this task. Now, because I have now unlocked all the current doors, I cannot bring up the spell screen again. Oh, actually I might be able to use it here. And as you can see there, I could use the spell screen, so it is working as intended. Ah, and here is our leaves from the last section, last task. Anyways, thank you very much. That was all the tasks I spent time on during this sprint. Thank you very much for your time, and have a wonderful day.
Hi, my name is Ryan Boyd, and this is my sprint to review or sprint run review. Sorry. As far as the tasks I have, the top one I had is as a player, I wanted the tool systems and spell system to be triggered by me and not by proximity. This more so had to do with us changing um, how the spell window was interacted with by the player, as well as with how the exit door and our tools in general are interacted with by the player. Originally, they were proximity based, where you would walk near them and they would open. Um, what we did was we added our BP interact interface. This one right here to both the door and our tools, so our collectibles. All right here. Yeah, so we added that to this one as well. And then with the spell window, what we ended up doing was adding it to our primary hub and allowing each of our tools to bring up the spell menu as well as when you interact with the exit doors. So the spell menu is not like directly in the inventory, but if you have any of the tools and can use them, you can have it pop up by pressing the corresponding button. Yeah, that's pretty much that task. My next task was as a player, I want the inventory to keep items for me from the crafting area and put them back in the inventory if I'm not using them. So this had to do with after you were crafting, um, if you had any extra items that you didn't use, those items will still disappear after you crafted your new item and added that. So we added some code. Let me see if I can show it to you. We added some code to the crafting pyramid so that if there is anything left, any quantity over 0, we go ahead and add that item back to the inventory so that we don't lose any items. It doesn't feel like the game is actually cheating you out of any items. As far as stress testing, we tried over and over again to have different amounts of items as well as different items in different quantities in there to make sure that everything goes where it needs to. In the As a player, I want to have a system that is easy to navigate and understand. This one was really just me refining our inventory system and making sure that the slots themselves were a bit more clear, a bit easier to read. This involves me just changing the way our slot looked a little bit, making the actual amount a lot larger, as well as the item name and the display bigger. As far as refining the crafting system and getting rid of any unneeded systems, this is kind of hard to show off, but more than anything, it was getting rid of the logic we had for combat, since that was one of the things that we cut. So basically, just getting rid of that. I went through and made sure that all of uh, most of my code has been commented. Yeah, and the last task I did was also has to do with like our imagination system, so our tools and the exit door, as well as the spell system. We wanted to make that um, or player controlled, so that they had more control over when like you use the spells and the tools. Um, which really just came from changing the passive system to an active system, which is uh, the implementation of the interfaces as well as um, stopping the proximity based interaction. So now, if I can show you in the level, seems like we don't have our toy box up and ready, but when you are around